boom boom. But I am boom boom ba boom bum ba boom bum ba boom bum bum ba dum bum bum ba boom bum 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 ba boom bum a boom boom ba dum bum ba boom bum ba.
All right. We are at 3 lines from the bottom. Page Kuf, Ayin Beis. The line begins with the word Lagabe Hazulas. So we have discussed quite extensively the principle of a name, pointing out that there are different madrigas that is expressed in the idea of a name. And as we pointed out, as the Rebbe says, name and oir, it's one and the same inyan. Because the oir comes from an etzem and is only present in the presence of an etzem, and so too is name and the shem, the name. And just like in the name, there is the hispashtus of the name, how the name applies to an article or how the name is being used to address him. In the oir also there is inyan from ha'ora and ha'ora de ha'ora. And all that is for the purpose to be able to understand how it is that l'mayla, the inyan from ha'ora, of the oir in soif, also has connection, has a shaykhus to the etzem ha'inyan. But dugm is ala mayla. This inyan of the name is like a model for the way it is l'mayla. The ho'eses fireis hein bechinas rosa dishmai. The 10 spheres, 10 spheres that comes to the focus, like gets surfaced, much further down after the tzimtzum and so forth. Hein rosa dishmai. That actually, that deep down, rosa means the soid. That deep down, the Esespheres is rooted in Shmei, in his name. Just like we said that a person has a name in a moshel, and having a name is a pshat, that he has an essential presence that ultimately can be called out. As spheres also represent an essential presence. Rosa Dishmei, Ukriyas Hashem, So Rosa Dishmei means the name itself, the Etzem Hashem, or Kriyas Hashem, and calling forth the name, Zehu Bechinas His Galus, versus Sphira is Ba'atzilus. The level that we say Kriya, that you call by name, and we explain that calling by name, this is the name as it is viewed and recognized me'azulas, from an outsider. This is the union from the Esesphiras Ba'atzilus, because this is the Esesphiras as they come by his galus, identifiably to the outside in Atzilus. And here is we're still going further in this, but we have to kind of keep track and follow through the significance of this analysis, of this analogy. Just as when you call a person by name, so we said that this is a lower level, a further distance from the name itself, and surely from the person himself. Nevertheless, this is his name, and you call him by name. When you call this name, you're calling him, even though you're calling him by name. But the name is something which connects you to him. So therefore, this Kriyas Hashem, Rosa Dishmei, this is the Rosa, the Seid, how the name is concealed before it is being identified externally. And then Kriyas Hashem, Zeh Bechinas Galus as a Sphira Atzilus. This when they become his Galus, and this is why it's called Ba'atzilus, because in Atzilus, even though it is Galus or as a Sphiras, it is still fully obvious that this Esesphiras is actually something which emanates from the Etzem Hashem. Ukemaimer, and as the Maimer, this is the Maimer Hazayar, and who the Apikas Asar Tikunin. You are he that brought forth, Apikas, you brought forth Asar Tikunin, 10 Tikunin. The 10 Tikunin, that refers to the Esesphiras. They're called Tikunin. This is a whole Arichazik explaining why they're called Tikunin, but the word Tikunin means that which prepares, which perfects something. And they are called Asar Tikunin, and Apikas Asar Tikunin, brought forth the Asar Tikunin, because the Asar Tikunin are Bibchinas Gilui. The principle of Tikunin, the Asar Tikunin, they exist even Berosa Dishmei, even when they are concealed, they're also called Tikunin. And then Apikas Asar Tikunin, when you bring forth Bibchinas Gilui, then they come out Begilui. What is the principle of Tikunin, perfections in the Etzem? So this is the principle that was mentioned, and we discussed it several times, that the union of the Etzem is a one reality, and this one reality is so real that it actually includes everything. It has everything in it.
Is the principle of Tikkunim?
Huh?
Explaining the principle of Tikkunim right now?
Right, I'm saying what in Tikkunin.
Yeah.
Because the Esesphiras, they attest to the fact that the source of the Esesphiras is is wholesome. It's not just that there's nothing there. In this etzem there is everything, except it's not begilui. It's there mitzad ho'etzem. And that's why it's called tikkunin.
I'm missing something.
I know you're missing. I'm trying to briefly introduce the principle of tikkunin. We always say that the nefesh is perfect. And all the koichos hanefesh surface in the oir hanefesh, in how the nefesh expresses itself and how the effect of the presence of the nefesh on the goof and so forth. Now, we always also point out also that the koichos hanefesh, functionally, they are identified externally only. When do you need seichel? When you don't have the etzem nefesh, you need seichel to sense what the nefesh would want, how the nefesh would identify with this thing. In the nefesh itself, you don't need seichel, because the nefesh is the truth. But in the nefesh, because of its total perfection, there is this element that the nefesh is capable of producing seichel, of being revealed. There is that inyan in the nefesh, inherent. The inyan that the nefesh does not need koichos does not mean only that because it's satisfied to be within itself, but because the nefesh is encompasses, mitzad itself, it encompasses everything, both the inside and the outside.
These are the tikkunim, this inner
These are
point.
the tikkunim, the outside. But they're not outside. Okay. I know I shouldn't have started, but I started. There's no way.
This sounds a little bit like what you marshal with relating to the what you explained about Ore and Seif, that it's such an entity that it could relate to Ein Sof. The Atzim is such a. Is it
It's not? Yes, but it's not, because if it can relate to Ein Sof, that's not koiches. Koiches are not Ein Sof, or Sfiras are not Ein Sof. Sfiras are specific to Sfiras.
So what are we saying here?
Okay, but I'll try. If need be, we'll go into the entire discussion, but I hope we don't. I want to use a very simple, down-to-earth thing which we discussed very often, a lot. A table is a convenient thing for a person to use. But we have understood in all our discussions that a table is not convenience only. A table is part of the self-respect of a person, part of the nefesh, part of the status of a human being, that he has to eat at a table, sit at a table. A table is something that suits him perfectly. Thus, when he identifies a table and he sits by the table and he feels perfectly at ease, perfectly in a full, he does not feel that like he's using something external just for convenience purpose, because otherwise he wouldn't have a place to put the book down. He relates to it. This inyan that he relates to it, this is mitzad the nefesh ha'odom. We said that table actually represents the spheres of malchus in the nefesh. The the principle that a person has the Sinyan HaMalchus, that he sits in front of a table and things are held up for him and so forth. Many aspects come with it. This is inherent in the Nefesh Adam because of the Atzmis and so forth. So even though the actual fact of a table surfaces only under certain circumstances, but in the Nefesh itself, there is that capability that should that circumstance come up, it will be able to relate to a table. Even though the circumstance, it doesn't anticipate the circumstance. That's not the should it come up. It is that the Nefesh is able to relate to the essence, to the highest and to the lowest. This lowest, and this is called tikkunin. It perfects it. It gives it a presence under all circumstances.
The lowest perfects it. It's the completion. The lowest.
And this in the mashal is Kriyas Hashem.
That's a gilui of the koyches.
It's a machine.
This is like the Etzem Hashem. Right. Okay, let's take another mashal.
If you can just say, sorry, the last point of the mashal we just had, that the lowest perfects it.
1 second. And then this following mashal will be even easier to understand. I want to just pass through this. We have Hashem, the Guf HaAdam, and the way the Nefesh is mislabish in Guf HaAdam, that is representative of also the 10 koiches. The head and the Guf and the hands and feet. Now, feet is our means to walk from one place to the other in the world. There's a distance, and we have to cover the distance. The only way to cover distance is using our feet. So you would, if you look at it externally, you would say feet are necessary only because there is a distance. And this whole idea of feet is created. This is how these idiots say that the creature developed feet because there was a distance. So we explained that the Nefesh HaAdam, the human being, the human perception of his presence in the world, encompasses and relates to distance inherently. The whole world is his platform. And because the whole world is his platform, therefore using the feet is a perfect natural thing for him. Going from this place to that place, this is not a breakthrough or a novel idea. We always perceive that place at the distance, something that belongs to him, that he belonged to. The ability to get there is his feet. Now, this ability to get there, begilui is his feet. Inherently, he had the ability to get there. This is what perfected him. If he perceived the distance, but he does not inherently have the sense of the ability to get there, then he is he's an invalid. The nefesh is an invalid essentially. And it becomes a whole when he adds feet. Says no, the nefesh is not an invalid. Inherently, it has a tikkunin, and when that nefesh becomes begilui and it comes out in physical feet, it can relate to it and give chayes to the feet. Am I coming through now? This is called tikkunin. That the nefesh is perfect and wholesome within itself, even when it does not need to actually utilize these koyches. B'tzad itself, because of the completion and perfection of the nefesh, it has everything. It relates to the entire reality, to the entire infinite presence, in a way that, yes, it relates to it, and it can be present everywhere.
The reason why these are called tikkunim, these are the lowest, is because he's dealing with things where he's not. Why are they called?
Tikkunim means perfections. That makes it. In other words, this is not his essence. This is what complements him.
And it complements him because he's not there.
It complements him.
Okay.
We're always going back to this sentence. It belongs where it belongs. It complements him because it translates his reality at all levels. As we said all the time, the reason that a person can relate to the idea of moving from one place in the world to another place is because in his perception the entire world is an area that he is present all the time, everywhere. Factually he's present in one place.
So where is it translating in that statement that he relates to everything at once? There's no need to translate anything. His etzem is everywhere.
Yes.
So where's the translation come in? When there's actually a world, and when there's actually he actually just has to get somewhere.
He has to get to the actual place. Since this seems like a different place. No, it's not. It's on the nefesh. He relates to everything. Like I explained, what's the idea of the claustrophobia? What's claustering? Clauster does not mean that he's closer and he can move around. It could be a wide range area. But if he's enclosed and is not open to the entire space, to the entire infinite reality of the world, he feels uncomfortable. He begins to sweat. That's the phobia element. Every person cannot tolerate claustrophobia because that's what a human being is. He can't relate to living within walls, except normally without this special effect, a special reaction. He doesn't take the walls as at the end of his world. He knows that there's a world beyond it. The phobia is when he is affected by the walls and he cannot project beyond the walls, so he becomes uncomfortable. But a person always projects like we always say, there is this sky and the earth. A human being always perceives the earth to be surrounded by an infinite sky. That is the reality of the earth. This is why you can relate to earth, because there's sky beyond. Okay? So this is Asat Tikkunim. And these Tikkunim are called as Esesphiras D'Atzilus. Because in Esesphiras D'Atzilus, this is when the Esesphiras can begin. The Esesphiras per se, as they are Rosa in concealed in Etzem, they are called Rosa D'Shmei. They call the name. What's a name? Because a name means that it is something which is known, which relates to the entire external existence. That's meant a name. The Ho'es Spheres. Okay, beyond the bottom line. The Ho'es Spheres. The 10 spheres, K'moi shehein klulin be'oiris of Hamatzil. At the state that they are, when they are kolul, when they are incorporated in the Oirein Soiv Hamatzil, Discussed already in von Ayin Soif. And this Ayin Soif, this is Hamatzil. This is what gives forth this emanation, this Gilui. Harei heim gam kein b'fchina shapes. Being, while they are still behel, contained within the Ayin Soif, they are also b'fchina shapes. They also have the element of names. As we explained in different name, because these Esespheres, the whole principle of having the Esespheres in the Ayin Soif is the fact that the Ayin Soif has the element of being, of relating, of coming begilui. So they are also b'chinas shemes rak shezehu b'chinas etzem hashoy. Except that the way they are, the Esespheres, as they are included in part of the Ayin Soif, this is what's called Etzem Hashem. When they come into Begilui in Atzilus, it's called Kriyas Hashem. A name is being called for. Okay. So we don't have to repeat this whole lineage from Etzem Hashem and so forth. We understand in principle that from all the discussion of all these days after, the name is an essential inyan. And why is it an essential inyan? Because the principle of this etzem is that it can be present everywhere. That's the meaning from the name. There is when there is the essence of it, it can be present, and then there is the gilui of it when it is also present. וכמוי כן יובן באויר אין סוי שלפני הציצו. The similar, so this is the way it is after the Tzimtzum, the Esespheres is after the Tzimtzum, the way the Esespheres are in Atzilus. And then, similarly, this is the original discussion, Oir in Soy Shelifnei HaTzimtzum. When Lifnei HaTzimtzum, this is Mamash Oir Ein Soy, which means this is the pure aspect of the Ein Sof. And the reason it's called the Oir Ein Sof is because it represents the Etzem, which is Etzem Bli Gvuli, Ein Sof. Remember this principle, right? So the oil in Soif, which is entirely, and the oil that represents entirely the pure infinity of the Etzem. And the infinity of the Etzem is what's called an essential infinity, not infinity because it spreads everywhere, but because it is inherently an Etzem. And Etzem by definition is infinite. It does not have any constraints. So the oil is option Lifnei HaTzimtzum, the b'chinas hispashtus ha'oir, that the hispashtus ha'oir element in this oil is option Lifnei HaTzimtzum. What is hispashtus ha'oir? Hispashtus ha'oir means when the oil can bring its quality and its message outside outside of the Yetzim, outside of its source. That's made hispashtus. Just like the sun that brings light to the world which is dark, which does not have such a thing as light altogether. The sun, because the sun is an atzmi of oir, therefore the presence of the sun brings light even in the place where it's dark. This is called hispashtus oir. And as we pointed out, that this hispashtus, the sun does not transform the world, does not make the world light. It brings the effect of light, the functional effect of light unto the world. That's what hispashtus. So the hispashtus oir, hainu ma she'olo b'tzoinu yizborich laha'atzil v'livroi. The hispashtus of the oir. Here we're talking about the oir social lifnei hatzimtzum. Being that we're talking about oir social lifnei hatzimtzum, it is still part and parcel of the Ein Sof. And therefore there is no actual hispashtus. What then is the hispashtus oir at that stage? It is all the birtzoinu lahatzil v'livroi. That there was the rotzen, lahatzil, to reveal and to create. Shezehu aliyas horotzoin al ho'ilams. This here, all between the lahatzil livrei. This is the aliyas horotzin. This is the rotzen, the rotzen coming forth and saying, I want oilmas, I want world. Areze, the dogmas. Somebody talking to me?
That's the echo.
It's an echo. Areze, the dogmas bechinas kriyas Hashem. This approximates the meaning of kriyas Hashem within the oir and safe lifnei hatzimtzum. This is like you calling forth, you're calling the name. From the etzem name. The fact that in this Etzem Hashem, all the spheres as they are contained in the Ayin Sof, this is also Etzem Hashem. And then all of the Tzin Allah Ha'atzil, this is already considering, recognizing from the perspective of worlds. Even though this is within the Ayin Sof itself, this is the Dugmas Kriyas Hashem.
And the Etzem Hashem is that if such a thing were to come up, so to speak,
then it would be shameless even there.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Bedugmas Kriyas Hashem. When Bedugmas Kriyas Hashem, it's not the actual Kriyas Hashem, because there was no world to call the name. This is within the oir and sof lifnei hatzimtzum. This is like the name being called. As we explained when we talked about this very lengthily, being called by name also represents the essential truth of the person. Why do you call him by name? Remember that discussion yesterday? Why do you call him by name, not say, hey, you? Because of the reality of this person. And this being called by name exists on the factual, practical level, where it's actually being called by name. And it exists also within the person himself. When the person is being called by name, he's not at that time first being identified as something that's present in the world. Yes, he's identified a person in the world, but he, in his very essence, already contains that presence. So when he is being called, he is not all of a sudden shaken up from his essence. Say, hey, I need you over here. In his very essence, as he is, even before he's being called, he has that in him being, that he should be called by name. He should be called out. That's what the Kriyas Hashem. This is what's called Bedugmas Aliyas Horotzen Alo Eilams. Now it's a person in our Moshe from Kriyas Hashem perceives that he has a name, even though to himself he doesn't need a name altogether. But he perceives that he has a name, which means he has a presence, a noble presence in the world. Such a presence that conceivably he's also actually going to be addressed. And when he's going to be addressed, he knows what that means. That's what's called revealing that Kriyas Hashem. But this Kriyas Hashem exists within, oh boy, within the person himself. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, we have to cut off suddenly.
Thank you.